Story title: The Study Group, Room 237. Never forget the discovery. Listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you happened at Ravencrest University last semester. The administration covered it up, the media was silenced, and the families were paid to stay quiet. But I was there. I survived. And now, 3 months later, I still wake up screaming every night because I know the truth about room 237 in the old psychology building. My name is Sarah Chen, and I was a sophomore psychology major with a perfect 4.0 GPA. I thought I understood the human mind. I thought I knew what fear was. I was wrong about everything. It started with a study group. Just 5 students trying to pass DR. Blackwood's Advanced Abnormal Psychology course. None of us knew that we weren't just studying madness, we were about to become its latest subjects. Character introduction: the perfect victims. Let me tell you about my study group, because understanding who we were makes what happened to us even more terrifying. There was Marcus Williams, pre-med student from Detroit, always stressed about maintaining his scholarship. He had this nervous habit of clicking his pen when he was anxious. Click, click, click. That sound still makes my blood freeze. Then Jessica Park, the overachiever from Seoul who spoke 4 languages and never slept more than 3 hours a night. She carried this vintage brass compass that belonged to her grandmother, constantly spinning it between her fingers when she was thinking. David Kumar was our group skeptic, a philosophy double major who questioned everything and believed in nothing supernatural. He wore these thick-rimmed glasses and had a laugh that could fill any room with warmth. And finally, there was Alex Thompson, the quiet artist who barely spoke above a whisper but drew the most hauntingly beautiful sketches in the margins of his notebooks. His hands never stopped moving, always drawing something, even when he wasn't looking at the paper. We were all ambitious, all driven, all desperate to succeed. The perfect combination of stress, intelligence, and vulnerability. Looking back, I think that's exactly what it was looking for. The setup: room 237. Ravencrest University was built in 1889, and the psychology building was part of the original campus. Room 237 was on the 2nd floor, at the end of a long corridor that always seemed darker than the rest of the building. The university had scheduled it for renovation for decades, but somehow the funding never materialized. The room itself was wrong. Not obviously, you couldn't put your finger on it at first. But the temperature was always just a degree or 2 colder than it should be. The fluorescent lights flickered randomly, casting strange shadows that moved independently of anything in the room. And there was this smell, faint but persistent, like old books mixed with something metallic. We chose room 237 because it was always available. No one else wanted to study there. The janitors avoided it. Even Professor Martinez, who'd been at Ravencrest for 30 years, would walk past quickly and never make eye contact with the door. But we were stressed college students with midterms approaching. We needed a quiet place to study, and room 237 was always empty. We thought we were lucky. The first session, Something's Watching. Our first study session was on a Tuesday evening in October. The autumn wind was howling outside, rattling the old windows of the psychology building. We'd reserved the room from 7 p.m. to midnight, planning to cram for Dr. Blackwood's exam on psychological disorders. Everything seemed normal at first. We spread our textbooks across the large wooden table, plugged in our laptops, and began reviewing case studies of schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, and psychotic breaks. It was around 8:30 when Marcus first noticed something odd. "Hey," he said, clicking his pen nervously. "Does anyone else feel like someone's watching us?" We all looked around. The room was empty except for us. The windows were too high and dark to see anything outside. But Marcus was right, there was definitely a feeling of being observed, like invisible eyes following our every movement. Jessica laughed it off. "It's just the pressure getting to you," she said, spinning our brass compass. "This material is disturbing enough to make anyone paranoid." But David, our skeptic, was frowning. "Actually," he said slowly, adjusting his glasses, "I've been feeling it too. It's probably just the psychological effect of studying abnormal psychology in a creepy old building." Alex didn't say anything, but his pencil was moving frantically across his notebook. When I glanced over, I saw he was drawing an eye. Just one massive eye, incredibly detailed, with an iris that seemed to have depth, like you could fall into it. "Alex," I called softly. "Alex, what are you drawing?" He blinked and looked down at his paper, genuinely confused. I don't know. I wasn't even paying attention to what I was drawing. That should have been our first warning. But we were college students, and college students are experts at rationalizing away anything that might interfere with their studies. The second session, Voices in the Walls, we returned to room 237 the following Thursday. This time, we brought coffee and energy drinks, planning to stay until 2 a.m. Dr. Blackwood's exam was in 3 days, and we were determined to master every psychological disorder in the textbook. The feeling of being watched was stronger this time. It started as soon as we walked into the room, like stepping into a cold pocket of air that followed us wherever we moved. Around 10 p.m., while we were discussing the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, we heard something that made us all freeze. Whispering. Faint, barely audible, but definitely there. It seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, a soft susurrus of voices speaking in a language we couldn't understand. "Did everyone hear that?" Jessica asked, her compass spinning so fast it was almost a blur. We all nodded. "It's probably just the heating system," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Old buildings make all kinds of sounds." Marcus was clicking his pen rapidly now. "That didn't sound like pipes. That sounded like people talking." The whispering continued, sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but never quite clear enough to make out words. Alex was drawing again, his hand moving automatically while his eyes remained fixed on his textbook. This time he was sketching what looked like dozens of faces, all with their mouths open as if speaking or screaming. "Alex," I said, reaching over to touch his arm. "Alex, you're doing it again." When I touched him, he jerked back so violently that his chair fell over. For just a moment, his eyes looked completely unfocused, like he was seeing something none of us could see. I'm sorry," he stammered, picking up his chair. "I guess I'm more stressed than I thought." But I noticed something that made my skin crawl. In his drawing of all those faces, one of them looked exactly like Marcus. Another looked like Jessica. A third looked like David. And one looked like me. The third session, the room changes by our third session, we should have stopped going to room 237. The logical part of my brain was screaming warnings, but the stressed college student part was louder. We had an exam to pass, and this was our study routine now. Saturday night, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. 8 hours to master the final chapters on treatment-resistant psychological disorders. This time, the room itself seemed different. The walls, which had always been a faded beige color, now seemed to have a slight reddish tint, like they were stained with something. The windows, previously clear, now seemed fogged with condensation that formed patterns too deliberate to be random. And the smell was stronger. That metallic odor was now unmistakable, it was the smell of blood. "Something's wrong with this place," Marcus said, his pen clicking like a metronome. "We should find somewhere else to study." But Jessica shook her head stubbornly. "We've already established our routine here. Moving now would disrupt our study pattern. We just need to focus." David was examining the walls with scientific curiosity. "It's fascinating how environmental factors can influence perception," he said. "The stress of exams is clearly making us more susceptible to suggestion and pareidolia." But Alex wasn't listening to any of us. He was drawing frantically now, filling page after page with increasingly disturbing images. Faces twisted in agony, hands reaching out from darkness, and always, that single massive eye watching everything. Around 11 p.m., the whispering started again. But this time, it was different. This time, we could almost make out words. "Join us," the voices seemed to say. "Stay with us. Forever." And that's when we realized the terrible truth. The voices were speaking in our own voices. Marcus heard his own voice whispering from the walls. Jessica heard hers. David heard his. Alex heard his. And I heard mine, calling to me from inside the walls, begging me to come closer, to listen, to understand. The fourth session, the revelation we almost didn't go back. Almost. But Dr. Blackwood's exam was on Monday, and we still hadn't covered the chapter on treatment-resistant disorders. So Sunday night, despite every instinct screaming at us to stay away, we returned to room 237. This time, the room was waiting for us. The door, which had always been slightly difficult to open, swung wide the moment Jessica touched the handle. The lights were already on, humming with an intensity that made our eyes water. And written on the whiteboard, in handwriting that looked suspiciously like Alex's, were the words, "Welcome back." None of us had written it. The janitor didn't work on Sundays. And Alex swore he'd never been in the room without the rest of us. But Alex was acting strange. Stranger than usual. He kept staring at empty corners of the room and nodding, as if someone was speaking to him. His drawings had evolved beyond disturbing into something that defied description, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, faces that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them, and symbols that looked almost like writing in an alphabet that didn't exist. "Alex," I said gently. "Alex, who are you drawing?" He looked up at me with eyes that seemed too wide, too bright. "The previous study groups," he said matter-of-factly. "They want me to document them so they won't be forgotten." "Previous study groups?" David asked, his skepticism finally cracking. "What previous study groups?" Alex smiled, and for the first time since I'd known him, the expression looked genuinely terrifying. "The ones who studied here before us. And before them. And before them. Room 237 has hosted many study groups over the years." He flipped through his notebook, showing us pages and pages of faces, all drawn with photographic accuracy. Students from different eras, based on their clothing and hairstyles. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. "Where did these come from?" Marcus demanded, his pen clicking so fast it sounded like chattering teeth. "They told me," Alex said simply. "They've been telling me all along. They are still here, you know. In the walls. In the floors. In the ceiling. They've been waiting so long for new friends to join them." That's when Jessica's compass started spinning wildly, the needle whirling like it was caught in a magnetic storm. The brass was getting hot in her hands, so hot she had to drop it. It clattered on the floor and kept spinning, faster and faster, until it was just a blur of motion. "We need to leave," David said, and for the first time, our skeptic sounded genuinely afraid. "We need to leave right now." But when Marcus tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but the door remained sealed, as if it were welded shut. "That's impossible," Jessica said, pulling out her phone to call for help. But her phone had no signal. None of our phones did. "Don't worry," Alex said cheerfully, still drawing. "They just want to meet you properly." They've been so lonely. The truth, what room 237 really is, that's when the whispering voices became clear. Crystal clear. And what they told us made everything hideously, perfectly clear. Room 237 wasn't just a classroom. It was a trap. For over a century, the room had been feeding on the stress, the desperation, the intense mental energy of students. It had been drawing them in, one study group at a time, absorbing their minds, their memories, their very essence into its walls. The previous groups Alex had been drawing weren't just random students. They were the victims. Students who had come to room 237 to study, just like us, and never left. Their bodies had been found days or weeks later, apparently died from sudden cardiac arrest brought on by academic stress. Natural causes. No one ever suspected the truth. But their minds, their consciousness, their souls, those remained trapped in room 237, eternal prisoners forced to watch as new victims were lured in. The room grows stronger with each group, the voices explained, and now I could recognize individual students among the whispers. It learns. It adapts. It becomes better at drawing in the next victims. Alex was no longer Alex. Something else was speaking through him, something that had been pretending to be our friend while gradually preparing us for harvest. "You're all so perfect," the thing wearing Alex's face said. "So stressed, so focused, so beautifully desperate to succeed. Your minds will make wonderful additions to our collection." The walls were moving now, actually undulating like they were breathing. The reddish stains were spreading, forming patterns that looked almost like a circulatory system. And embedded in the walls, just barely visible beneath the surface, were faces. Hundreds of faces. All the students who had come to room 237 over the decades, their expressions frozen in eternal screens. The escape attempt, fighting back, but I wasn't ready to become another face in the wall. None of us were. "This isn't real," David said, his scientific mind fighting against the impossible. "This is a shared psychotic episode brought on by academic stress and sleep deprivation." "Then explain this," Marcus shouted, pointing at the walls where faces were now clearly visible, mouths moving in silent screams. Jessica had picked up her compass, which was now burning hot and spinning so fast it was creating a high-pitched whine. "It's pointing everywhere," she said. "Like there are magnetic fields all around us." I realized the compass wasn't reacting to magnetism. It was reacting to the spiritual energy trapped in the room, the accumulated consciousness of decades of victims. "Alex," I called to our friend, who was still calmly drawing while something else looked out through his eyes. "Alex, I know you're in there. Fight it." For just a moment, the thing wearing Alex's face flickered, and I saw a glimpse of my real friend underneath. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's been in my head for weeks. Ever since the first session. It made me draw them so they could communicate, so it could learn about us." "How do we get out?" I demanded. "You don't," the thing said, Alex's features reshaping into something that was no longer quite human. "You join us. You become part of the collection. Your minds will make the room stronger, better able to attract the next group." But Jessica had an idea. "The compass," she said urgently. "It's reacting to all the spiritual energy. What if we could use it to disrupt whatever's holding us here?" It was desperate, but it was all we had. Jessica grabbed the burning hot compass and began swinging it in wide arcs around the room. Wherever it pointed, the walls seemed to flicker, the faces becoming less distinct. The thing controlling Alex shrieked, a sound no human throat could make. "You don't understand. This room has fed on students for over a century. It won't let you go." But we were fighting back now. Marcus grabbed his pen and began stabbing it into the walls, each puncture causing the room to shudder. David, his skepticism finally shattered, started reciting every rational, scientific fact he could remember, as if logic itself could drive back the supernatural forces. And I began talking to the trapped students whose faces lined the walls. "You don't have to help it," I called to them. "You were victims too. Help us escape." The battle, Minds Against Madness. What followed was a battle that existed more in the realm of consciousness than physical reality. The room fought back, reality bending and warping around us. The walls stretched and contracted like a living thing. The ceiling lowered and raised. The floor tilted at impossible angles. The trapped students were torn between their imprisonment and their humanity. Some tried to help us, their faces in the walls mouthing warnings and encouragement. Others had been absorbed so completely that they fought to keep us trapped, jealous of our freedom. Alex was fighting the hardest battle of all, wrestling for control of his own mind. His drawings were becoming weapons now, sketches that somehow materialized in the room, ropes we could grab, tools we could use, even a crude map showing where the door should be in the constantly shifting space. Jessica's compass was our anchor to reality. No matter how the room changed around us, the compass pointed to true north, giving us a reference point in the chaos. Marcus used his nervous energy as fuel, his pen clicking becoming a rhythmic beat that somehow disrupted the room's concentration. David's logical mind became a shield, his rational thoughts cutting through the supernatural confusion like a knife. And the students in the walls, some of them remembered what it was like to be human, to want freedom, to fight against imprisonment. They began to rebel against the room that had trapped them, their combined will weakening its hold on reality. The climax, the choice. Finally, we reached the climax of our battle. The room offered us a choice, speaking through every surface at once in the voices of everyone it had ever trapped. "Stay willingly," it said, "and we will make you comfortable. You can study here forever, learning everything there is to know about the human mind. Your bodies will never age, your minds will never tire. You'll have eternal academic success." For a moment, I could see the appeal. No more stress about grades, no more pressure to succeed, no more uncertainty about the future. Just eternal, peaceful study in a place where we would never fail. But then I looked at the faces in the walls, at the expression of endless regret in their eyes, and I knew the truth. This wasn't success, it was the ultimate failure. It was giving up everything that made life worth living. "No," I said firmly. "We choose freedom. We choose uncertainty. We choose life." The room screamed then, a sound like 1,000 voices crying out in rage and disappointment. The walls began to crack, decades of accumulated psychic energy beginning to leak out like water from a burst dam. The escape, breaking free in that moment of weakness, we made our move. Alex, finally free from the room's control, drew one last picture, a door, simple and clean, leading to safety. And somehow, through the power of his artistic vision and our combined will, that door became real. We ran. All 5 of us, bursting through Alex's drawn doorway and tumbling out into the hallway of the psychology building. Behind us, room 237 was collapsing, not physically but spiritually, the accumulated consciousness of a century finally breaking free. The trapped students didn't follow us. They couldn't. But as the room's power broke, I thought I heard them whisper one last time, "Thank you." The aftermath, the cover-up. The official story was that room 237 suffered structural damage due to a gas leak that caused hallucinations. The room was sealed permanently, and that entire wing of the psychology building was condemned. Dr. Blackwood's exam was postponed indefinitely after she suffered what was officially called a nervous breakdown. Unofficially, she kept insisting that room 237 was calling to her, begging her to bring more students. Our study group never met again. We couldn't. Every time we looked at each other, We remembered the faces in the walls, the feeling of being trapped, the moment when we almost chose eternal imprisonment over uncertain freedom. Marcus transferred to a different university. Jessica changed her major to art history. David became an English major, unable to trust his logical mind after it had proven so inadequate against supernatural forces. Alex was different. The experience had opened something in his mind, some kind of psychic sensitivity. His art became even more powerful, but also more disturbing. He could draw things that hadn't happened yet, people he'd never met, places that existed only in nightmares. The warning, it's not over on me. I'm telling you this story as a warning. Because room 237 may be sealed, but it's not destroyed. I can feel it sometimes, late at night when I'm studying alone. A cold presence, watching, waiting. The university is planning to tear down the old psychology building next year and build a new student success center. But I know the truth, you can't destroy something like room 237 with hammers and bulldozers. It will find a way to survive, to adapt, to begin hunting again. So if you're a college student, stressed about grades, desperate for a quiet place to study, and you find a room that's always empty, always available, always just a little too convenient, walk away. Don't trust the whispers that promise you'll do better if you just stay a little longer. Don't believe the voices that tell you this is where you belong. And if you start seeing faces in the walls, hearing your own voice calling from impossible places, or if your friend starts drawing pictures of people who shouldn't exist, run. Because room 237 was just one classroom at one university. But academic stress, the pressure to succeed, the desperation of students who will do anything to pass their exams, these things exist everywhere. And where they exist, places like room 237 can grow. The hunger is patient. It's always been patient. And it's always looking for the next perfect study group. Final hook, the continuation. 3 months have passed since our escape from room 237. Last week, I received an email from a freshman at Ravencrest University. She'd found my contact information somehow and wanted to ask me about study spaces on campus. "I've found this perfect room in the new Student Success Center," she wrote. "It's always available, really quiet, and it has this interesting atmosphere that makes me feel so focused. Room 139. A few other students and I are planning to start a study group there next week." I tried to call her immediately, but her phone number was disconnected. I drove to Ravencrest, but the administration claimed no student by that name was enrolled. Her email address bounced back as non-existent. But I know she's real. Just like I know room 139 is waiting for her and her study group, patient and hungry and ready to begin the cycle all over again. The only question is, will anyone believe her story when she tries to warn the next group? Or will they think she's just another stressed college student who cracked under the pressure? The end, but not really. That's the true horror of places like room 237. They prey on our ambitions, our dreams, our desperate need to succeed. They offer us everything we think we want: knowledge, achievement, a place where we belong. But the price is everything we actually need: freedom, choice, and the beautiful uncertainty of being truly alive. So remember this story. Share it with every college student you know. Because somewhere out there, in some university, in some quiet corner where stressed students gather to study, room 237 is waiting. And it's always hungry for the next perfect study group. Sleep well, students. And if you ever find yourself in a room that feels like it's watching you, remember what happened to us, and run while you still can. Because once the room decides you belong there, leaving becomes so much harder than staying. And sometimes, you never leave at all.